Meghann Ackerman from the City of Somerville's Communications Department. Today's guest is Alderman-at-Large Jack Connolly. Alderman Connolly has served on the Board of Aldermen for more than 30 combined years, first as a Ward 6 Alderman and now in an at-large position. Alderman Connolly was born and raised in Somerville, and he's also raised his own family here. He's a small business owner and has been involved in many of the large projects that have shaped Somerville over the years. Welcome, Alderman Connolly.
Joy to be here, Meghann.
Great. So you have obviously been involved in things going on in Somerville for a very long time as a resident, a business owner, and an alderman. You've seen a lot of, some of the big projects that we, all think about when we think about how the city's developed. One of the things that I think is interesting looking back on Somerville's history is, the city used to have tons of trolley and train stops. They got taken out. And since then, it's been a really huge deal whenever we got one back. And I know you were very involved in the process to get our first one back, the Red Line stop in Davis Square, as well as you've been involved in bringing the Orange Line stop to Assembly Square and now advocating for the Green Line extension. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how those processes were different over the years.
Oh, absolutely. And it's very fitting, Meghann, because my grandfather immigrated here from Ireland. The only job he could get when he came here was essentially digging the Park Street station. So I have a long history of transportation and knowing the T and how it goes on with my grandfather, and two of my uncles also worked for the T. So growing up, it was nothing but stories about the T and tunnels and switches and a lot of routes, et cetera, and meeting a lot of people in that. So I was pretty well rooted in it. In the 70s, there was a big clamor for expansion and more public transportation. And at the time, the Red Line was going to go right under Davis Square. It was supposed to go to Alewife and then out to Lexington.
So it was going to miss us all together.
It was going to miss us, but the people in Lexington and Arlington said, no, we don't want it. We're afraid people from the city are going to come out and rob our houses and go back in. Essentially, that was the story. So Gene Brune, who was then an alderman before he became mayor, and a lot of us in the West Somerville area were really annoyed about this. So we went in to see Governor Dukakis, and to his credit, the Secretary of Transportation, Fred Salvucci, was there, and we told him, well, listen, if they don't want it out there, why can't we? It's got to go under Davis because it's a tunnel all the way out to Alewife. Why not? So the governor said, well, Fred, what do you think? If they don't want it out there, how about in Davis? And he said, you know what, if we don't go that far out, we might be able to put a station on either side of the square and maybe connect them as it is right now. So thanks to Governor Dukakis and Fred Salvucci and a lot of us from the community who basically made all that noise, we have the Davis Square station. The difficulty now is for anybody watching, remember now, there were no fax machines. Copy machines were basically just merely getting to make an impact. If you didn't have a mimeograph machine or an ad in the local newspaper, the word didn't get out. So when we were discussing the planning for the T, we met as part of the Davis Square Task Force every month with representatives from the T, from the city, and from Urban Mass Transit Authority, the federal people providing the funds, to basically work out how the whole thing would be planned, built. Now remember, we're going to be blasting under Davis Square, and everybody had to do work and go on. So essentially that planning went on for a good 6 years before shovels went in the ground and the earth started to be dug up. But over the course of the late 70s through 1984, the T was actually constructed, and we opened February 1st of 1984 down in Davis Square with the governor and then Mayor Brune, and it was the second month of my first term. So it was really a culmination of a lot of work. But remember now, again, 1984, fax machines were basically just beginning to come alive, still no cell phones.
Sure.
So it took a while for the impact of how effective the stop was going to be. Red Bones came along. Robbie Gregory at Red Bones decided he'd take a shot at opening a business in Davis Square. And gradually, things began to happen. The Harvard Vanguard building got built in the late 80s, the first large-scale construction after we had to wipe out and take by eminent domain an old block of wooden stores that were taken out. And as a result, 212 Elm Street got built, and a lot of action with Davis Square residents and businesses helped shape the T stops in Davis and basically gave people the real reason to kind of live and work around Davis. in the mid-90s, rent control was abolished statewide. All of a sudden, because of the train stop, people might have gone looking for Cambridge, but they discovered West Somerville because the apartments were cheaper, generally a little bigger, and were pretty accessible. So that red line was really a culmination of effort by dozens of people who put a lot of time, energy, and years into the planning and then the reshaping. Fast forward now with the orange line and the green line, now that we've got the social media, we have all the implements to help tell the story and plan a lot quicker. It's a lot easier to communicate, and you can see around Union Square right now how quickly people are planning for the yet-to-be-built Green Line extension. So there's a huge difference, but ultimately I think it's a much better one because we're going to be ready for when the construction does happen.
Yeah, so that was one thing I was kind of thinking about as you were talking about. It sounded like in the 70s and 80s when you're trying to sort of advocate for this project, it was a little bit more difficult to get people involved, to kind of spread the word. And I'm sure you were at least one of them earlier this year. Some of the Green Line forums were beyond standing room only, so it definitely a big difference. And I know another sort of a bit of a difference in planning for especially these Green Line stops. You know, as you mentioned, the train stops come in, a lot of activity happens around them. And you know, you as well as the city planning staff, your colleagues on the board, and the mayor have been really looking at sort of planning for that to happen, and looking at, you know, the things the city can do around, you know, zoning to kind of help shape that. And I know you've been involved in the ongoing zoning overhaul project.
It's really since 1990, and I was around for that as well. At the time, we thought we were doing the most creative possible way of shaping the planning for the city. The extension of the Green Line was still not even in the forefront of anybody's mind back in 1990. So fast forward to now, all of a sudden, in order for that Green Line to be built, essentially the T wants to see that there's more density, that some of the buildings are a little taller around, and that there's much more activity in order to justify the fact that those couple of 3 miles coming out of Boston into Somerville and touching on Medford would be worth that large expense, because so many people will leave the cars at home and come into in and out of the city as a result. So many people who live in Somerville may work in Boston or Cambridge. So this is just another way that that's going to happen. But the zoning has to allow for those things, and now with so much interest in the community, we want to try and make it a little bit easier. Right now, so many of the buildings are essentially non-conforming. They don't fit the zoning code, but since it's there, it can stay. But when you go to change it, it almost always involves a special permit and a trip to City Hall for a planning and zoning board. To some people, it's somewhat discouraging, so we're trying to refine that and make it a little bit easier for projects to know exactly what they can and, most importantly, what they can't do, so they can either build it with the requirements of the zoning, or if there is going to be a special permit, it might be a relatively minor one. So that's in process. It's going to take us a little while to do that, but like anything worthwhile, it's going to take some time. But I'm confident that we'll reshape the city, especially in light of the Green Line extension.
Right, and I'm sure you've heard this statistic, but I always think it's very interesting. Right now there are 22 residential buildings that could be built as is under our current zoning code. So I think that just kind of gives you a taste of how, I'm sure, confusing it is if you're coming in and trying to build a home or a business or make modifications.
And Meghann, a lot of it was for the convenience of a homeowner. If somebody buys a house, and even to put on a very small extension or a deck, there was nothing in the zoning code that basically spoke to that. So now, okay, now you've got to go through this pretty elaborate planning and zoning submission that could take a couple of 3 months, depending upon look at plans, and it can be very frustrating to a homeowner. Hey, all I want to do is put a 10 by 20 deck on the back of my house so we can sit outside and enjoy the backyard. Well, when it turns into a 5-month project, we got to find a better way to do it, and that's basically one of the many things we're trying to do, not just to make sure a developer can know the size of a building, but for a homeowner who wants to do a very simple add-on.
Yeah. So for the Board of Aldermen, you all get your committee assignments every year, and that's kind of a chance for aldermen to get to work closely on issues that are near and dear to them. And some of your committee assignments include youth, seniors, and veterans. I know you've also been very active with teen empowerment here in Somerville. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that, what you've been doing with the group and some of the things that the group's been doing in the city.
Well, I was very fortunate to grow up here in the city when in the 50s and 60s, Meghann, there was over 100,000 people here in Somerville, and that there were just kids and activity everywhere. And back then, there were some coaches for the number of teams and all, but there were a lot of games that occurred on their own. And now, so I always had mentors and coaches and people who were around, and I think my involvement with teen empowerment essentially is a result of that, and that there's nothing more than young people can use as an example, a coach or a mentor. And what teen empowerment has done is found a way to connect with many facets of the community, utilizing the skills of young adolescents from 14 to their early 20s to connect. We've had very successful relationship working with the Somerville Police Department. So not only do Somerville Police get to know young adults who are going through all kinds of transitions in their lives between school and family and dealing with a multitude of cultural issues with 51 languages being spoken here at Somerville High School. Yeah. So, but to have a good relationship with members of the community, especially the police department. We have a lot of teen empowerment programs going on with school issues, with health issues, but importantly with the police. We have these walking dialogues where police officers and young people, including elected officials, just basically go around the community to show people that interaction can occur, and I participate in some of these. Mm-hmm. And it was amazing to find people walking down the street saying, geez, isn't it great to see police and young people working together, get to know each other. As a requirement now, all the new recruits that come onto the Somerville Police Force basically interact with teen empowerment, so they get to know young people and some of the struggles and issues they're going through. Conversely, the young folks get to know what new police officers are going to have to get through. A lot of our officers have come up in this area, and that they had their own experiences, so they can share some of those things. And I think that has led to what I consider has been a very smooth, racially comfortable situation here in Somerville. With as many languages as we have, as many cultures, we all seem to do a very good job of getting along here. In Somerville, with so many people in 4 square miles, a lot of the houses are very close by, so you get to learn how to be a neighbor real early on, no matter what part of the city you're in.
Yeah, I think one of the great things about teen empowerment is, obviously there are adults like yourself, members of the police force, people on staff involved, but a lot of the programs and initiatives and the issues they want to take on really come from the youth involved in the program. And they get a chance to kind of take the lead on those. And
that's the whole idea, that we want to empower young people with the ability, number one, to learn how to interact and to think creatively, but there are skills that some of us can help teach and they can put into practice. We have guys like Danny McLaughlin, who've been just a tremendous resource, who can help work with and show young folks how to plan, organize, how to run a meeting, and how to inform themselves about certain issues. And it's been something I've been very personally close to, because it's been a great assist to the efforts we're making here to make this a safe and comfortable community for people of all ages. And I contribute the work that Stan Pollock and all the people at Teen Empowerment have done over the years to really help young people connect across the entire cultural and social divide here in the city, and have really helped, I think, communicate to not just school and community organizations, but to members of the community that, this is a great place to live, and that young people can have a positive impact on what they do, not only with each other, but the rest of the community.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're also very active on sort of the other side of the age spectrum, issues having to do with seniors. It seems like every year there are sort of more programs being offered by our senior center. But I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about some of the the issues you hear about from seniors in the community. What they're concerned about, what they enjoy about being here.
Sure. No, this all sort of comes to a philosophy that Mayor Jean Brune, who was very instrumental in helping me along as I look back over time. And one of Jean's fond sayings always was, if you take care of seniors and take care of young people, the rest of us will be able to do pretty well on our own. So I've always made it a point to look after youth activities and certainly senior activities. Now getting into my 60s myself,
we might see you over at the senior center some more.
Well, I'm over at the senior center paying visits and interacting with folks. But the fact that we have people like Cindy Hickey and her tremendous staff there at the Council on Aging, they have basically helped put a roadmap for people who want to get active, want to be busy, want to get healthier. Those wonderful opportunities are there. If you want to interact with other people, there's something there at the Council of Aging. You want to get a little better with computer skills, Cindy and her folks have set up programs there. You need some help understanding Medicare, Medicaid, health insurance. There are folks there who can do that. They can also assist family members of folks who are getting on in years and may have some difficulty getting around. There are a number of resources that are available there at the Council of Aging. As aldermen, many of us will call Cindy and her team just to get some assist because a constituent may call and say, gee, I'm having some trouble. My uncle, my father, my brother, they're having some issues. Is there someone we can call? Generally, Cindy and her team will right away say, listen, we've got the perfect situation. Why don't you come on by? We'll talk to you, or come on down. We have activities virtually every day. If you have a look at the Council on Aging calendar, it's chock full of activities for just about every interest, every level of concern that people have, trips, activities. So there's a lot going on here, and it's just a question of making time to be at one of these events. So to support that just makes perfect sense because we're all heading in that direction. I'd like to know that there are going to be opportunities for me maybe someday when I may want to just choose to find something to do on a particular day.
Yeah, sometimes I look at what they have going on and I'm a little jealous that I can't go.
I'd like to be on one of those buses going on one of those trips for a couple of days, that's for sure.
I'm sure it's quite interesting. And I know something you sort of alluded to is that you have a lot more people now with the baby boomer generation getting older. So we have a lot of sort of younger seniors kind of entering the system and a lot more, children or nieces and nephews who are kind of dealing with this for the first time and needing access to some of those resources. And
that's really the key. I've got a Medicare card now. I just turned 66 back in April, and it's you kind of look at it and say, really, that's for me? But it's something that since I'm still working, I don't need to use a lot of it, but it's something I'll be able to utilize, draw on Social Security. A lot of answers are there for people who are somewhat mystified by all the various amounts of information. You do get a lot of information, and Cindy and her folks can really help people understand some of the basics and what you really should do and what a family member can do to help you go through that process. We got some great resources here in the area for Social Security benefits, Medicare, Medicaid. A lot of people can just help you, glean through that voluminous amount of detail that comes your way.
Sure. And another group that you do a lot of work with is veterans in the city. So I was wondering if you'd maybe talk a little bit about that as well, and some of the programs that we have in the city, some of the initiatives you've worked on.
Well, sure. The growing up, both of my parents were World War II veterans. My dad served in the Army, and my mother was one of those people who came home from work one day, told her mother and father that my 3 brothers can go in the service, then I think I will too. And as a result, spent 3 years in the Navy, pretty much mostly stateside, but supported the effort. And so growing up in a family, veterans and public service has sort of been a watchword. So it was very easy for me to support the cause of veterans. Some of my high school friends and classmates went to Vietnam. One of them, sadly, John Kenny, was was killed in action just a couple of weeks after arriving in Vietnam. We have a park here down on Highland Ave, right opposite Rite Aid, named after John. But so it always struck me that there's support for people who are willing to give not only their life, but so years of their lives in support of their country. So for me, it was an easy call to support those efforts. And over the years, it's been very easy to make sure that we don't forget those people who are victims of any one of the conflicts or wars that have gone on, and to maintain a close relationship with the Veteran Services Office here, who have a wealth of information for anybody who is looking to get more details. They can show them how to contact the VA for different types of health-related issues, and most of the time it involves nothing more than a contact. The last couple of years, our Veterans Department has done a great job. Brian Bishop, who took over last November, 20 years in the Air Force himself, is very familiar with processes and procedures. So all it takes sometimes is a simple phone call, a visit, or an email, and Brian can help pull you in the right direction. The difficulty, Meghann, is that a lot of veterans who are returning from the Middle East conflicts are a little reticent to get involved for a lot of reasons, and as a result, we're encouraging family members, if there's somebody that might need some help, then either encourage them, or maybe some of us can maybe nudge people along to make some initial contact. Brian can put in between himself, and Kathy Carey and his department can at least open the door to people and then work with them with some specialized help to make sure people can get the resources they need. That's one thing I think none of us are ever going to have an issue with, is making sure the resources for health, emotional, mental health services are available for the people who need it the most, especially our veterans.
Yeah, and like you said, it's similar to the situation with the seniors. Sometimes it's the amount of information. So the city, we're not necessarily providing the services, but we can help you sort of understand and wade through that. We
can help put together a roadmap on which way to go, and to kind of move you in that direction, give you people and contacts who we've worked with over a long period of time who can provide that additional assistance, because most people don't mind when they have an idea where they're going, they just don't know which way to go.
Yeah, figure out where to start.
Especially at older, your memory isn't as quite as good as it used to be, and it's just a little more frustrating sometimes. So to have people in your corner who might be just a phone call away, or can at least provide that, it's a great resource.
Yeah, and providing those kinds of services, I'd imagine, are something you're pretty familiar with, having served as an alderman for, how many years total is it?
I'm a little over 32. I had about a 16-month interlude between 2006 and in May of 2007. But so from 1984 through now, it's just about 32 years. But it's been really enjoyable, because as an alderman, you get to be involved with helping people get services, but also working with neighborhoods and making changes, changing directions of streets, getting repairs made, and having been a ward guy for over 20 years, especially around Davis Square, wholesale changes to the square with the arrival of the T meant you had to reshape economically what was going on in the square, neighborhood meeting after neighborhood meeting about this building, its size, its dimension. So you get to meet a lot of different people, and conversely, you have resources within the city. I know who to call when there's street pavement issues, or a light is out, or there's some special attention, a tree is down. Oftentimes it's just nothing more than a simple notice. 311 has helped that a lot, but up until a few years ago, it was calling ward aldermen or calling people. So you get to become known as someone who could solve an issue, a problem, a fixer, if you will. You knew where the resources were. And the great thing about all the administrations between Gene Brune, Mike Capuano, Dorothy Kelly-Gay, and Mayor Curatoni, is all of their staffs were very willing to be involved and help out, because they knew that we were advocating for our constituents. I know how to take care of things myself, but when someone's new to the city, they don't know how to get this done. You can usually be the person who can be the neighborhood ambassador at City Hall to save them a lot of time, and that's basically something that I enjoy doing. People always, well, how come you help that guy? You hardly knew him. Because you can.
Sure, yeah. So you started out serving as a ward alderman focused in Davis Square, Ward 6, and then ran for a position at large. So I was wondering, what's kind of the difference between those two jobs?
Yeah. In economics, you'd probably hear the term macro versus micro. Ward 6, where you would base it, that was your world. You pretty much focused on streets and neighborhoods here, and now expand that now take that same knowledge, but on a much broader sense. Now you've got financial issues that affect the entire city. You've got things like zoning now that, again, are going to affect the whole city. So it's like taking a step back, jumping outside the barrel, and then saying, okay, gee, I can see what things are like here in a much more broader sense. Now Union Square, Assembly Square, Davis Square, Ball Square, I can take a lot of that ward background and help it apply to working citywide on issues. And I found that the ward background was just a perfect fit for me to tackle financial issues and legislative issues that affect the whole city. Essentially, having grown up here and now having worked in a ward, I know what every single ward alderman is going through, and that they can't tell me that this is a problem, because most of the time I've probably been through that before, so I can provide some help to those folks when they're looking for it, and that conversely makes it easy when talking with the administration about the broad impact that this may have throughout the city. So to me, it's been a great 1-2 combination to have both those experiences.
And has the job changed a lot over the past 30 years?
Oh
or?
boy, has it changed a lot. It used to be, it was the phone calls and the telephone messages, and now it's the massive amount of emails that come through, because it's much easier for people to communicate via email, and a lot of times most people think that they've done the job. Well, I sent them an email and they know how I feel. I like to speak to people, and whether people will stop me in Davis Square and Ball Square or wherever I may happen to be, and they'll tell you, you can feel the emotion if they're passionate about the issue. Or oftentimes if I get an email, if I can see someone's really concerned, hey, can I call you? I'd much rather speak to somebody. Number one, I talk a lot faster than I type, but it's much easier to have that two-way conversation with somebody, because they can tell you their frustrations, and you can almost feel that emotion. An email, anybody can just cut and paste and send it, yeah, but when you speak to somebody who really has some concerns, they give you more background. And I enjoy that. You can make a great connection that way. It makes it a little bit easier to advocate for whatever the issue may be.
Yeah, so it sounds like technology has been great for some things, getting more people involved, and but you know, that kind of person-to-person contact is still definitely needed.
I used to enjoy the message machine, because you come home and there might be 5 or 6 of them there, and I'd go through one message machine a year. Now, sadly, those message machines are antiques, and with that technology not being there, but I still enjoy the interaction, and I do resort to the phone whenever I possibly can, or if we can meet in the square or something. Just, to me, it's a little more personal, and I think people enjoy the fact that you're willing to do that. And if you can make the time, or if I'll meet somebody at City Hall going to and from, you'll take that extra few minutes to get that sense of urgency that people have, and then hopefully get on to resolving the problem.
Great. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, and we'll see you in the next edition of Alderman at Work.
Joy to be here, a lot of fun. Look forward to coming back.
All right, thanks.